Lionel Rail fans, welcome back to the Train Zone. I want to show you some GP projects that I made. This one's original. It's a 1989-1990 18504 Magnetraction chassis, this Frisco here. This was a modern dual can motor with 4 traction tires. Would have had plastic trucks. They pull really well, but with plastic around the wheel axles and no brass bushings, no metal trucks out here, no Magnetraction. It's a lesser design. It's not as durable. And I wanted Magnetraction. I wanted to put this beautiful shell onto a Magnetraction chassis. And I did the same thing with this. This would have been an MPC engine. It would have had aluminum wheels like this. It would have had the aluminum in here and the big gap. So this is sitting on the same chassis. This one would have been a dual can motor, modern, with plastic trucks. Put it on a 18504 chassis. So we have 1, 2, 3. We have 4 of these engines right here. Now this is a post-war 2338, this Milwaukee Road. This is a post-war chassis. And you see the difference, the narrow gap here versus the wide gap with the post-war replica chassis. These still have an MPC type frame which is bent down. The post-war frames are bent up, so then the cab nuzzles down in here, and I believe that looks a little bit better. This is also a 2338 Milwaukee Road chassis. It had a broken shell on it, and the MPC gap here, look at that compared to the post-war. And then here we have the post-war replica and then early MPC with these wire railings. This would have been early 1970s with these type of railings. Magnetraction for me is the way to go. So I wanted to get rid of those modern dual can motor engines, put in some pulmor motors. They're more durable, and get rid of the newer stuff, get rid of the MPC stuff where I could, and get a more durable train to pull as many cars as I can. And these Midwestern trains that I grew up with, the Chicago Northwestern, we had those in Iowa. The Rock Island and the Milwaukee Road, we had those in Iowa. These were in Oklahoma. The Santa Fe, of course, would have been a little more south. You can see the aluminum wheels with MPC versus the steel wheels of Magnetraction. So you can tell just by looking at them what they have. You know, these should be aluminum wheels under here. These should be aluminum wheels. The Magnetraction is more desirable. It's the steel being heavier duty on those axles. It's not going to loosen up like these aluminum wheels. They come loose, and you got to put some Loctite in there with a lot of use. I used to run my trains for an hour a night, and I was able to loosen up those wheels and ruin the motors within probably a year and a half. My Rock Island train, I think I only ran it for 3 or 4 years. It was on its 3rd motor when I took down the train set at age 13. So let's bring you in here, show you a little bit more. So here we have post-war replica and post-war replica. Gap's not too bad. Here we have post-war and post-war replica. The bigger gap, right, because the frame bent down here, bent up there. Post-war and MPC, it's even worse. Look at how big that is. Is that really desirable? Is that what you're looking for? And then the tripod won't go any lower. So here we have early MPC and then post-war replica. Flimsy wire railings of early MPC. And then mid-70s MPC. The wire railings, a little bit different. The post-war, little version of mixing the railing designs. And of course I put the post-war railings on here. This would have been an early MPC engine. This one, the CN, the 8031, it would have been on a chassis like this. It would have had these type of wire railings. So putting it on a post-war chassis, I just got some post-war railings, put them on there. Of course the Rock Island, it would have come with a white frame and white railings. I didn't care about that. I wanted Magnetraction. I could have put a Magnetraction motor on a post-war or on a Rock Island white frame, but I got this cab with no frame. Now this early MPC Santa Fe here, the 8250, it only weighs in at 2 pounds 10 ounces, and it has its 2 rubber traction tires. A 18504, the post-war replica, it weighs in at just over 3 pounds. So this would be similar, this would be similar, and this would be similar. But then the post-war chassis, and of course it has the horn, this 2338, it's going to weigh in at 3 pounds 6 ounces. So it's possible that these, with the weight of the horn and the horn relay, might pull the best with an extra 6 ounces of weight, but most of the weight's in the back. It's not over the motor. The reason that this mid-70s MPC 8776 Chicago Northwestern GP20 is still sitting on an MPC chassis is that these MPC motors are shorter. It's right under this nose. And post-war or post-war replica motors, these are all taller motors. It's a very, I don't know if it's the exact same design that the post-war motor is, but it's very similar. And they're taller, so it won't fit under here. The motor would be probably this tall. It's got a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch taller. So you can't do it with a GP20. You can only do it with a GP9, GP7. The collector truck is at the rear like on post-war with the post-war replica chassis. Collector truck at the rear versus a collector truck on the motor. If it was MPC, right, we have the collector truck in here. God, look at all that aluminum. Is that attractive? Or is this the look you're looking for? Post-war. Another thing about these dual can motor engines, like this one would have been, is the trucks were plastic, real flimsy, and these are metal trucks. This is a real train. They don't come with that decal. I put that decal on there. This one would have had plastic trucks too, but now it's got the Magnetraction. And remember, the post-war engine weighs a little more than the post-war replica. And I have these lined up here, show you the powertrains on these. We have post-war replica, early MPC, this is the 8250 Santa Fe, and then we have MPC. So you can see some differences here. One reason that the post-war could be heavier than the post-war replica, it's all die-cast metal, but this is a little bigger boss. This is hollow. Not sure what's in there. Right, without opening it up, we'd have to look in there to compare it. It still has a seam screw, which screws the top of the motor onto it. And one of the neatest things about these post-war or post-war replica motors is you can replace this gear that's driven off the armature. If this thing wears out, and I have seen it, you know, it's brass, it's soft. If your steel worm gear on the bottom of your armature doesn't have any grease on it, or you run it for years and it dries out, boy, she's going to wear out. You just drop this thing down in there. It has another one of these plastic bushings over here, and these are pretty cheap. This is the gear on the side, which drives the small little gears then that drive the wheels. You just pull this thing out, slide a new one in. It's a really quick fix. So like I say, post-war, so it has the collector truck on the back. Post-war replica, some of them had a horn. And the post-war replica engines, they have still a mechanical reversing unit. Remember, they came out around 89, 1990. They don't have the solid state reversing unit, which I don't have an issue with. I don't have a problem with those. I've never had one fail. I have a few engines with them. They seem to work great. So the post-war replica still has a collector truck at the back, at the trailing truck. Look at the early MPC. Has collector trucks on the front and the rear. I wish they were all like this. That's great. Whoa. Come on back here, buddy. That's no way to treat a train. And then, of course, the MPC. The MPC engine with just the collector trucks in the front. And there we have the plastic. None of that die-cast metal. That's why these are so light. And like I say, the tip of the armature is just laying down on this thin piece of plastic. That thing can crack under here. I think that the armature has pressure down on this piece of plastic when the engine's going in reverse. And maybe if you're ripping it back and forth, forward, reverse, and abusing it a little bit, maybe that's how they break. I don't know. With a 3-position reversing unit, it can't just be going from forward to reverse and hitting it hard. Of course, early MPC, it's all plastic in there too. And you got to keep these really greased in here. This is the biggest wear spot for MPC engines, what I saw when I was a kid. You got to keep that greased, or else the steel pins on the side of the engine will wear down from the nylon gears. The nylon will wear the steel. And then these gears start sliding out, and they're not working good. And then the next biggest problem was the aluminum wheels coming loose on the axle shafts. The frames are also a little bit different. Post-war or MPC, it's real smooth metal. The post-war replica, you can see it's kind of a tread plate metal. It's on the frame here. Some subtle differences. There's those separately applied grab irons. Wanted to show you the motors in these two. Here's post-war, and of course this is the 2338 Milwaukee Road chassis that had the bad cab. So the 2338 came with the horn, reversing unit, horn relay. I wanted to show you the difference in these motors. So there's post-war replica, still very similar. And then you see the MPC motor, much shorter. That's how that motor is able to fit inside of that GP20 shell. So the post-war replica has the modern bulbs versus the older bulbs, similar to the MPC. And see, they all have the mechanical reversing unit still. Three different eras of Lionel trains take 3 different screwdrivers to remove the shell. Folks, you know me and my Magnetraction. I couldn't just stop with the GP9s, right? I had to do it to some switcher engines too. So the early post-war switcher engines, the first ones they made, the 622, which had Magnetraction problems, I don't think it was a very good Magnetraction. It was when they were first working with it in the early or late 1940s. The 622 Santa Fe. This is the 623, and then they made a 624 Chesapeake and Ohio. And these switcher engines are unique because they have the die-cast chassis, which is very heavy. Plus with the Magnetraction, right, it's going to be the best pulling power. The 10 grab iron stanchion that we love so much. The wire railings. So based on this engine, and then the wire railings in the back, you know, I wanted some more switcher engines that could pull like this one could. This is by far the best pulling switcher engine I have. So I had a wore out motor on this 8111 Detroit, Toledo, and Irontown switcher engine. So I picked up a post-war replica switcher from the same manufacturing numbers as that Lionel used with the GP9s and the GP7s, the 18500 series. So the 18503 with this red stripe, I thought it would look really good. Is 18503 is the Southern Pacific switcher engine with a bell, post-war replica. They also made a 18501 Western Maryland post-war replica switcher with a bell. And that would have, I think, just a black frame. This one had a broken cab on it. I got it for less than $90, so it was the one for me. So this guy, what is this? The 613, 635. These were real thin from the mid-60s, this post-war Lionel engine. I think it only had one traction tire. The complete chassis and motor, everything was gone. All I got with this train in the cars, all I got was the shell. So what do we have under here? There it is. That's the 623 chassis. Look at that big steel boss there. All that weight. The beautiful wire railings, 3-position reversing unit, Magnetraction, collector truck on the front, and of course late 40s, early 50s design, the flying shoe to operate the coil coupler in there before they had the disc couplers that were pulled down with the electromagnet in the track. So that's what this kind of coupler is, the newer design. Still the post-war replica, look at that, with a collector truck in the front, the motor in the back, 3-position reversing unit, look how clean that is. So with all this weight of the die-cast shell and the Magnetraction, brass gears in there, not nylon like MPC. God, it's just so durable. I'm just in love with it, aren't I? So, since this is a post-war cab here, and it had such a thin motor, it also came with a weight. And of course, the motor was in the front, and the weight's, you know, not over the motor in the back here, but we're leaving that in there. And with this being a post-war cab, I don't want to glue one of these in there. I drilled a hole in one, and I have it mounted in the front of here, and I dremelled the top off it and bent it, and I have it in the back here in that slot where the MPC frame would have come into here, this little slot in here. So I do have this cab mounted down. Since it's an MPC cab and it's not worth that much, and they're basically a dime a dozen. This one's like new. It's really, really nice cab. But I figured I'm going to go ahead and glue one of these in there. The 6-0622-007 lock plate for the early post-war switchers. I picked up some extra ones. I was going to do some more of these projects. I don't know if I'm going to now. So I could do that. What you do is you drill a hole in the middle of this, and then you can use that screw hole and have that hanging down. But then of course at the back you need to bend it. I also put some of these post-war wire railings on the back of this DT&I switcher. See them back here. Just drill some holes. Thought it looked pretty good. I was going to experiment with putting the wire railing that came from the 18503 shell, which came with this post-war replica chassis. I was going to experiment with drilling some holes and putting that railing on here too. You know, it has a simulated molded plastic railing here. And I figured with this on there behind it, it just wouldn't look very good, so I didn't do it. The 10 stanchion railing, the sought after. Beautiful design. Early post-war, that's where it's at. Alright, here's a bonus. These MPC 6-wheel drive SD18s, they're not scale. You know, they're a little short, but they're fun to run. 6-wheel drive with 3 traction tires usually. Some of them only have 2 traction tires, and the middle axle is just aluminum wheels on both sides. So look at that before you buy one. Get the one with 3 traction tires. They're fun to run. And of course the CB&Q, the Burlington route, Burlington, Iowa, before it merged with what, the Great Northern and Northern Pacific, I think it was, right? That was the predecessor of the name before Burlington Northern. These Magnetraction engines now, these are fun to run. 12-wheel drive, dual motor, modern. And they have some quirks. Some of the posts that the springs go on to hold the motor inside of the frame, sometimes those things slide out of the motor and you got to glue them back in there. And the plastic shell has this big ugly screw up in here, and it cracks, and it has this big grommet there, and it's not very appealing. But they're more scale. They're big, they pull well, they have a horn in them. The 18203 is the CP rail. These are fun to run. Here's a modern MPC Trainmaster 8-wheel drive Magnetraction. It pulls really well. Thank you for watching my Lionel Diesel projects video. Building Magnetraction engines, taking some nice MPC shells with lesser powertrains, putting some Magnetraction under them. The shells are beautiful. I just don't like the powertrains under the MPC stuff. I still own some of it and I'll run it, but it's not as durable. And remember, to stay subscribed to the videos, you have to click that red bell. After you subscribe, click that red bell to stay subscribed.